Okay, so let's pick back up with what we were talking about. And so we were talking about what was Hurston's purpose in the trial scene. So Janie doesn't belong to either the black or white community because she has parents of different races. And so she, as opposed to being able to belong to both, she doesn't belong to either. And the black community from the Glades rejects her and sees her as a threat to them because they killed their friend. And ultimately, even though the white women embraced Janie after the trial, the community is not going to accept her in the long run. Where it's the idea in this moment, they surround her and cry for her and protect her. But tomorrow, it's going to be a completely different case. And so what this points out is that Janie's been an outsider for most of her life. If you think all the way back to the beginning of the book when she's in school and she gets teased for her hair and for who her parents are. Her whole life, she's kind of been an outsider. At Eatonville, when she was married to Jody, while she was part of the community, she was still also an outsider because people wouldn't talk to her the same way that they would speak to each other, and they had different expectations for how she had to behave. And so it's the idea that for most of Janie's life, she's been an outsider. And so Hurston, within the complexities of kind of the racism, sexism, and classism that's found in this trial scene, is showing that Janie doesn't belong to any of the communities, and therefore is kind of highly susceptible to these racisms, sexisms, and classisms. So let's pick back up in reading. So the sun went down. She took her room at the boarding house for the night and heard the men talking around the front. You know them white men's wasn't going to do nothing to no woman that looks like her. She didn't kill no white man, did she? Well, long as she don't shoot no white man, she can just kill as many black men as she pleases. Yeah, the black woman can kill all the men they want, but you bet not kill one of them. The white folks sure hang you if you do. Well, you know what they say, the white man and a black woman is the freest thing on earth. They do as they please. So what talk does Janie over here? So Janie, essentially what they're saying that if Janie had killed a white man, she would have been found guilty. And honestly, that's probably true considering the time period. It's a very unfortunate truth that if in this time period, if someone was black and they were accused of a crime against someone who is white, they would very likely be found guilty, especially in the South. And so they suggest that the white community is glad that Janie killed Teacake, and that's the reason why she was let off. And so we see kind of, while we know this is not true about Janie, we can kind of understand why the black community from the Glades think that Janie has done something terrible, and how they think that she has kind of taken up with what the people living in the Glades see as the white community's desire to kind of get rid of, as kind of like what they were talking about in the last chapter, like the strangers who are black, who they see as a threat. And so we see that occurring here, and we can sympathize with both Janie and with Teacake's friends, and we can see both of their perspectives. And so let's take a look at this quote here. A white man and a black woman is the freest thing on earth. So there is something ironic here because Janie has had to fight and suffer for her freedoms. And so this kind of analogy, which we're going to say is a false analogy between the white man and the black woman, is quite clearly false during this time period. And even today, there are institutions that don't afford black women this same kind of rights and access to things that white men have. And so this is systemic, lasting from this time period, and also obviously prior to this time period going into the times of slavery. And so this comparison is ironic at best and just clearly wrong as well. And we've seen this through Janie's story, where because she's a black woman, she has essentially had to kind of make her way through this world on her own. And she's married herself off to so many husbands because that's her only access to power. If Janie hadn't married, terrible things would have happened to her because she had no family and because she was a black woman. And so through these marriages, Janie has found a way to make a really good life for herself, and that has not been easy, and that definitely does not make her the freest thing on earth just because of her race and her sex. Her freedoms have come because she has fought for them. And so this shows how obviously, those who are gossiping about her right now don't know her story and don't know what she's gone through. And so, what is Hurston's purpose here? Again, it's showing the complexities of of discrimination, and ultimately, it's showing that the Black community's fears are justified. While they're wrong about Janie in this instance, they're not really wrong about many of the other things that they say. And Janie is ultimately trapped between the fears of the Black community and the hate of the white community, and she's stuck in between there. And again, she's an outsider, and she can't find a place in either community. So let's keep reading. Janie buried Teacake in Palm Beach. She knew he loved the glades, but it was too low for him to lie with water maybe washing over him, and every heavy rain. Anyway, the glades and its waters had killed him. She wanted him out of the way of storms, so she had a strong vault built in the cemetery at West Palm Beach. Janie had wired to Orlando for money to put him away. Teacake was the son of Evening Sun, and nothing was too good. The undertaker did a handsome job, and Teacake slept royally on his white silken couch among the roses she had bought. He looked almost ready to grin. Janie bought him a brand new guitar and put it in his hands. He would be thinking of new songs to play to her when she got there. Sop and his friends had tried to hurt her, but she knew it was because they loved Teacake and didn't understand. So she sent Sop word, and to all the others through him. So the day of the funeral they came with shame and apology in their faces. They wanted her quick forgetfulness, so they filled up and overflowed the 10 sedans that Janie had hired and added others to the line. Then the band played, and Teacake rode like a pharaoh to his tomb. No expensive veils and robes for Janie this time. She went on in her overalls. She was too busy feeling grief to dress like grief. And so, in this final page of the chapter, how does Janie bury Teacake? So Janie gives Teacake, and this is a kind of direct quote from the text, a royal burial. So she buys him a vault, and vaults are above ground, kind of like burial, like when you bury someone above ground in a vault. And she has white silken, and he's like laid out on a white silken couch among the roses, and she buys him a new guitar so he can play in heaven. And so she gives him everything she possibly can with the money that she has. And also, Janie understands that Sop and Teacake's friends try to hurt her due to their grief. And ultimately, she forgives them. She has no hard feelings. And because of this, she invites them to the funeral to kind of try to show that she has no hard feelings over what's happened. And this is another direct quote from the text. They came with shame and apology in their faces. And this shows that they no longer blame Janie and they feel guilty for their actions. It's the idea that in the moment of the trial, and remember that trial happened right after Teacake had died, they blamed her and they thought that she had killed him for her own gain. And now that some time has passed, they've come to their senses and realized that that's not the case, that Janie was also their friend, and they feel guilty for their actions. And ultimately, this shows kind of the theme of how grief can drive people to do things that they might regret. And we've seen this in other parts of the book, like when Jody's on his deathbed and Janie says some pretty harsh things to him. We see examples throughout the book of these really trying moments of grief and anger. They drive people to do things that probably isn't the best version of themselves. And Janie understands this now because she's been through enough where she sees the reality of this and is able to forgive people for this. And so Janie has grown to become stronger than hurting people when they're in grief. So she could have kind of like not invited Teacake's friends to his funeral. She could have rejected them because of what they had done. But because of the things that Janie's experienced in her life, she's become stronger than grief, and she does the right thing. And at the very end, it says she was too busy feeling grief to dress like grief. And this is again referencing back to when Jody, her second husband, had died. Remember that what was I saying? Remember that Janie, she wears her mourning dresses, mourning as in M-O-U-R-N, not mourning as in the day, because she feels as though it's expected of her. So the people of Eatonville expected for her to wear mourning black dresses. And so she wears them for a while, and then she takes them off after a while because she is not sad, and so she doesn't want to wear them. But here we see a genuine sense of grief, where she's not thinking about what other people will think of her. She's too devastated. And so she wears her overalls that she's worn the entire time on the Glades, because she's just too broken up and sad to put on a black dress. And so this shows how genuine Janie's become, and it shows her growth. So even though a huge tragedy has happened, we see, just like how the ending of the other marriages, Janie has learned things and become a stronger and better person because of it. All right, so we have one more chapter after this, chapter 20. I will see you there, and we can finish off the book. Thanks so much. Bye.